Once whites become a minority, they will be in a vulnerable position. No ethnic group should ever give up their political power. Yes, I'm a professor of psychology at California State University, Long Beach. I've been there about 25 years. And I teach psychology, mainly developmental psychology and evolutionary psychology. I was born in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, a long time ago. Raised in a small town, and I suspect that has had a pretty big effect on me overall. Well, growing up in small town America and seeing the changes that have been inaugurated in the last few, 20, 30, 40 years, is quite a remarkable difference. And so I keep thinking about what life in America was like in 1960, and it's changed so dramatically. And I'm trying to understand, what happened to this world. Why did we lose it, and where are we going now? My background in philosophy and my sort of leftist politics from the 1960s, I took much more of a cultural perspective. And I even started out almost with a sort of antipathy towards evolutionary interpretations. I felt they were simplistic and everything. So I got into the idea that culture was very important. I got into the idea of how culture can regulate things like marriage and so on. My perspective was to show how cultural input was very important. And from there, it's a very short step, actually, to thinking about how culture can create effective groups. And so that is really how I got into studying Judaism as a group evolutionary strategy. I started to realize that humans are very cultural beings, and we can manage our own behavior in a way that would be inconceivable for animals. So we can regulate our own groups, we can decide who can be a member of our group, we can punish people who are cheaters, and because that's the main problem from an evolutionary point of view about groups. There's a strong belief that altruism, self-sacrifice, cannot evolve in animals. And so nobody could ever figure out, and I think that's still the case today, how natural selection could produce altruism within human groups. But my approach was very different. I started thinking, well, with culture, we can create effective groups. With humans, the whole evolutionary stage shifts to culture. It's not about genetics anymore. It's about genes ultimately, because if you win this game, then your genes are propagated. If you lose the game, you don't. Your genes are not propagated. But the mechanisms by which this battle is carried out become conflicts over the construction of culture. If there were genes for rebelliousness, there certainly, it would be possible that there would be social controls that would clamp down on such genes. In fact, there's a recent book by Greg Cochran and Henry Harpending called The 10,000-Year Explosion, and in that they talk about Asian groups and in particular China, and they suggest, on the basis of some genetic evidence, that certain genes related to impulsivity and rebelliousness don't exist in that culture, and they suggest it's because it's been weeded out. And that's what I'm suggesting in the case of Judaism, that there's certain traits that have been promoted within their group that have been very adaptive. For one, ethnocentrism, that is, Judaism really runs on, it depends on high levels of ethnocentrism within the group. And the idea is that over historical time, if you were Jewish and you were not ethnocentric, well, that meant you didn't have very much allegiance to the group, and so there was selection against those people, and so ethnocentrism, continues to be strongly emphasized within the Jewish population.
Dr. MacDonald, what other group traits besides ethnocentrism are important?
There are quite a few other traits probably that are involved with Jews that have been selected for over historical time. The one that I emphasize most is intelligence. Jewish groups favored intelligence beginning in the ancient world. It's very clearly written out in Jewish religious writings to marry people who were skilled in interpreting and understanding the Jewish writings. And people who were able to do that were strongly encouraged. They had access to very good marriages. They had access to business opportunities. They were not taxed as much as other Jewish members in the community. And so there are a lot of benefits to being a very an intelligent person within the Jewish community. So what that meant was that intelligent Jews had more children, and that is natural selection. And so everything we know about intelligence does show that intelligence is inherited. That means there is genetic variation for intelligence, and if the more intelligent people are having more children, well, that is going to be natural selection for intelligence. That's what we call eugenics.